Welcome back to Podcast Pediatricians. Thanks for all the nice feedback and thousands of downloads. Okay, in the low thousands of downloads. We know we're not supposed to look at the downloads, but it's just human nature. Sorry, Cliff. We're also now broadcasting from our new swanky digs high above the Caesar Rodney Square. Matt, you can look out the window and you can see the statue of Caesar Rodney riding his horse and the old Wilmington post office.
Nice.
It was a bit pricey to move up here, but I think it will be worth it.
The sky deck, huh?
We did promise our episodes on constipation, and we'll be putting them out this week, or at least recording them this week, but we also heard some feedback that people would like our episodes to be a wee bit shorter. Now, Matt and I are used to listening to 5-hour Don Carlin hardcore history mega episodes.
Marathons.
But I realize that for most of you, that's way too long, and even an hour is too long, so we're going to make them shorter.
We'll do our best to trim it back. No promises.
So in that spirit, we've had multiple stories having to do with milk that have been piling up in our stories to do, and decided to start out with an episode centering about milk and dairy. And since dairy and milk are the number one constipating foods in our experience, you agree?
Yeah, I'd say they're right up there with bananas.
And rice. Mm-hmm. We just thought it kind of made sense to make it the theme of this episode before we get into constipation. So buckle up as we, the podcast pediatricians, Rob Walter
and Matt Gotthold,
take on all things milk and do our long-awaited Oscar movie review. Well, no one's really been waiting for it except us, but we've been long waiting to tell you about movies.
The 2 months later Oscar review.
Yes. And remember, you can subscribe to Podcast Pediatricians on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, and I don't know, other ones, I think. We're trying to get on Spotify, but evidently it's not easy to do. You got to have some connections. So if you have connections, please go on podcastpediatricians.com and tell us about them.
Yeah, and you have the opportunity and you enjoy what you're hearing, please take just a minute and go on to iTunes and please rate us. We appreciate the fives, and we hope that will get the word out a little bit more so about our podcast.
And like us on Facebook. Matt still needs to make his own Facebook so we can administer it together, but we do have a Facebook page. And again, send us pearls, faux pas, suggestions to podcastpediatricians.com, and we'll try to use them and, of course, give you credit by name. We ask you to weigh in if you like having the sound of the beeper in our opening theme music.
Oh, I hate that.
Matt hates that.
Oh, man. Yeah, if it wasn't for the fact that Rob it was the engineering maven on that one, that never would have made it into the play.
So if you hate it like Matt, just let us know.
Cuts right through me, man.
No hard feelings.
Cuts right through me, please.
And lastly,
do it for me.
Lastly, for the record, I do not watch Gilmore Girls. I just like the first 2 episodes. I've been getting a lot of
How can you say I don't? I don't watch it, but
I
just like the first 2 episodes.
That doesn't mean I watch it at all. And I also want to announce that I did make the cut for Matt's poker game just 2 nights ago and had one of his famous bacon sandwiches. We played under a huge hole in his ceiling.
Yes.
So when money went to the house, it really went to the house.
We had a little leak action at my house over the last snowstorm with the gutter that got backed up, and came downstairs to find water literally pouring out of the fan in the middle of the room.
A little leak action is kind of an understatement.
And be fixed this week.
There was a lot of weird games I never heard of. I only won 1 pot all night, and
that was the plan.
I was probably the big loser, and I lost $1. So, and Pappy, the oldest guy in the table, cleaned me out.
He did.
So again, since dairy is tied to constipation, we go over weird and new milk stories this year. We'll do this, and eventually we'll cover pediatric nutrition and obesity. And Matt is obsessed with the microbiome.
It's my thing. I'm thinking about getting a tattoo.
I don't want to know. Okay, milk. Obviously, cow's milk is a great source of calcium, and calcium is lacking in many pediatric diets. It's recommended that 1 to 3-year-olds get about 700 milligrams of calcium per day, 4 to 8-year-olds about 1,000 milligrams, and 9 to 18-year-olds about 1,300 milligrams of calcium per day.
Do you make it a point to stress that during your visits?
Honestly?
Yeah, honestly. I mean, it's something that oftentimes slips my mind. And I feel particularly guilty when I forget to mention it to young ladies, pre-adolescents and adolescents because I know that they're laying essentially down their bone structure so that they don't break their hip when they're 80 years old. And now is the time. But yeah, I've not been good at it, and I am guilty as charged there.
If I do, it's mostly in those young teen girls, which is almost too late.
Right.
So,
Right.
good point. We both are not doing a good job.
Well,
at that.
As we've pointed out, we're far from perfect, as you guys will continue to hear.
An 8-ounce glass of milk has about 300 milligrams of calcium, and 6 ounces of yogurt has over 250 milligrams of calcium, and cheeses like cheddar and mozzarella between 2 and 300 milligrams per ounce. Soy-based foods can be good sources. Legumes, nuts, and seeds and certain fish are also good sources of calcium, as are some vegetables and fruits, especially figs. And, oh yes, the sweet potato. Now, the Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, has always heavily featured dairy products prominently in all their guidelines for children's nutrition. That even includes kids with lactose intolerance, that they really stress just to use lactose-free dairy. They also are very much in favor of lower fat milk, especially if there's any evidence of increased weight, which we'll touch on.
Yeah, we'll also touch on lactose intolerance somewhere down the road, probably on a diarrhea episode, because that I think is largely misunderstood.
Certainly milk is preferred over sugary drinks, and I think we've made a lot of progress reducing juices and especially soda, although recent studies show that 4 to 6 ounces of 100% fruit juice a day is probably just fine. So I don't try to say never have a healthy fruit juice.
Right. I find with food recommendations in general, trying to put a set limit on almost anything and not just proposing a healthy diet sometimes makes it one of those more tempting types of foods. So 4 to 6 ounces of something that's super sweet, frankly, although that's the guideline, I'm not sure it's something that I'm a huge advocate of, mainly because I think it just perpetuates further consumption.
Well, again, it's 100% fruit juice, not Capri Sun.
Right.
And not Kool-Aid.
Have an apple or an orange.
True.
Right?
True.
And soda. Oh, my God. I mean, the best quote I heard as it pertains to the lack of nutrition in soda is liquid candy.
I usually tell people if you're drinking soda, you're just eating a bag of sugar.
Pretty much.
And it is a bit of a scandal in our country that many of our public schools and probably private schools get paid to keep this liquid candy dispensers all over their school.
Yes.
I mean, maybe it's not as bad as if they had smoking machines, which, cigarette containers, which they don't have anymore. Matt grew up when they did have those everywhere, but it's still really bad that they are pushing this liquid candy to our teens.
Yeah, it really, as far as I'm concerned, it crosses the line, and maybe we can address that and the tie-in with education and funding and tax dollars, et cetera, sometime in the future.
Yeah, that's a big nut to crack.
Oh, indeed.
So, Matt, are you a big milk drinker?
I must say I'm not. I generally have it in my coffee, but I am a big cheese guy. I love my cheese and crackers, and also am fond of some other dairy stuff, including yogurt and whatnot.
And I'm not a big milk person either. I certainly have patients who are like, my kids get these 3 big glasses a day, and that's great. It's a good source of calcium. I have it in cereal. I love milkshakes. I don't know about you growing up in the Pine Barrens in Jersey, but growing up in the 60s in Syosset, Long Island, I mean, we had the Hammer truck guy, and we used to have a soda truck come every week and just give us cases of soda, because my parents' motto basically was, why drink milk or water when you can have soda all the time?
I had an uncle who worked for Pepsi, and so he used to periodically drop by with a case of soda. But soda was kind of anathema at my house. My parents really didn't want us to have it for whatever reason. They were probably still of the same opinion that soda cranked your kids up, and we were cranked up enough. We can talk about that sometime, the whole sugar cranking your kid up fallacy. Yeah, so they kept it in the basement, and there was a huge scandal at my house because some of it went missing. And so my dad cut off it was either a dime or a quarter a week allowance at that point back in the 1930s or whenever I grew up. And the scandal lasted for several weeks until my sister finally fessed up. It's a big thing we still discuss.
She's a soda fiend.
Oh, she was, yeah.
I don't want to let slide that little thing you said about the increased sugar hyped up kids fallacy. I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's for another time.
I was saying that wasn't the case. Yeah, my parents were under that misperception.
No, I don't.
You agree with it? You think
agree.
Sugar hypes kids up?
I agree that certainly there's a subset of kids.
Oh, we'll definitely
talk about
this.
That. Okay. All right. So back to milk. 4 milk-related stories to cover. Number 1, what's in a name? So Big Milk, the milk lobby people, are fighting tooth and nail with the plant-based lobby people about if you can really say any product of cashews, almonds, soy, rice, coconut, quinoa, and yes, I used to call it quinoa, should be called milk at all. Issue number 2, just how nutritious are these plant-based milks, or if you will, milk substitute beverages? Issue 3, what about the new A2 milk from down under that comes from ugly cows and is touted as healthier than our usual A1 milk we've been drinking for centuries? And lastly, issue number 4, does low-fat milk make you gain weight more than whole-fat milk, especially in children? Issue number 1, what is real milk and what is real cheese? Now, the FDA defines milk as a lacteal secretion obtained by milking one or more healthy cows. That's why Velveeta cannot call itself cheese. Now, Cheese Whiz, which was invented in 1952 by Ed Traceman, not the Chicago pediatrician, I think. Well, Cheese Whiz was created for Kraft Foods and can only call itself processed cheese food, which also includes individually wrapped cheese slices, like the ones you use to give medication to your dog.
Is that what you use for your dog?
Yes,
yeah?
cheese.
My dogs prefer peanut butter.
I go cheese.
A little messy.
So Cheese Whiz has some regular cheese that's reprocessed, along with additional ingredients like xanthan gum. It gets its tanginess and flavor from citric acid and flavorings, and also has some orange coloring. Cheese Whiz is described as a cheese dip by Kraft. The ingredients list cheese cultures, but it does not contain regular cheese. So my question to you, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Do you like your cheesesteaks with whiz or not?
Okay, so I'm a provolone wit guy. So just to give you some Philly ease here, Rob insists that I grew up in the Pine Barrens. I actually grew up about 10 minutes outside of Philly on the Jersey side, and so
it's debatable.
so cheesesteaks, I know something about cheesesteaks. And in Philadelphia, there are a set of rules when you order a cheesesteak if you don't want to make a buffoon out of yourself. One of which is have your order ready. Don't be diddling around with your cell phone. Pay attention and make it short and sweet. And so the way we order cheesesteaks in Philly is, my personal favorite would be cheesesteak, prov, wit. Cheesesteak, provolone with fried onions. That's the wit part.
And I'm just cheesesteak, whiz, wit.
Oh, you consume that stuff?
I do. And actually I have a big cheese whiz stain on my Chase Utley jersey.
Oh, you stained the Chase.
Yes, but I don't want to. It gives me memories, so I'm not going to wash it off. And are you Pat's, Geno's, Tony Luke's?
I'm a Tony Luke's guy, but I'll tell you what, and this is going to be counter to Philadelphia culture, but I'm actually a pork guy as opposed to the cheesesteak action. I prefer a nice porchetta with some long hots and some sharp provolone.
No, I'm a cheesesteak, but I haven't been to the original one. So the only one at Citizen Bank Park is Tony Luke's.
Yeah.
So that's the one that I've had.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to milk. Big Milk is having some trouble. Americans drink 37% less milk today than they did in the 70s, and milk sales have tumbled a bit. However, yogurt and cheese sales have gone up. So you are a yogurt fan?
Yeah, I'm a Greek yogurt fan. I think a lot of the stuff that gets plied as yogurt these days is really, again, just candified yogurt with the granola and the M&Ms. I'd rather get some nice fresh fruit in there.
Good. Well, I'm not a yogurt guy. I like skyr, pear skyr from Iceland. It's a long story. That's really good.
Skyr?
And rice pudding is my dairy
nice.
go-to. Yeah. And there's a store in New York that sells only rice pudding called Rice to Riches. It's heaven. So anyway, the plant-based milk products sold in the dairy aisle have the same shaped cartons as regular milk. And on the label, they call themselves milk. They are a small but growing market, about 10% of milk sales. Places like Starbucks are starting to offer these plant-based milks because of great demand. Big Milk wants the FDA to crack down on these plant-based beverages labeled as milk. The plant-based people say that consumers obviously know that their milk is not from a cow, and there's no pictures of a cow in the box, and it's fair to have alternatives to regular milk. The plant lobbyists bring up milk of magnesia, cocoa butter, cream of wheat, and peanut butter as names that also use dairy terms. Now, I think that's a silly argument. You don't sell milk of magnesia in a milk carton next to milk. And also, it's disgusting.
Do they actually still sell milk in cartons? I mean, the last time I saw a milk carton,
You're just not shopping. Yes, they sell milk cartons. I don't know where you're going, but they sell milk cartons. I have to agree with Big Milk on this. I mean, I think they are plant-based beverages, but I think it's very misleading, and we'll go how different they are to call a plant-based beverage where they take a lot of water and they add protein and calcium and they add some things of different flavorings and they call it milk. And they color it white.
I don't know. You know, it's got some advantage to it in the sense that at least it seems as though they're subtly advocating that over what we just talked about, sodas and juices and Capri Suns and all these empty caloried, drinks. Now I realize that a lot of the other quote unquote milks do indeed have added sugars and a lot of other things that aren't so good for you, but I don't know. To me, milk is something that got squeezed out of something. The whole coconut milk type of a situation where it can be plant based and essentially murky and white. So I think that is probably the perception of the general public. But I understand the position of the milk producers. As I recall, something like this went on over in Europe a little while ago with Parmesan cheese, didn't it? Where there's a huge argument about you can't call it Parmesan unless it's from this certain area because you're compromising the quality, and this is our domain.
It's like the champagne people.
Yeah, the champagne people, I think, did the same thing. Yeah.
I will disagree on that because I just think it's not milk.
I don't think it's that big a deal.
There's a separate argument about whether cow's milk production leads to more air and water pollution than the plant-based milk-like beverages. Although it takes over 15 gallons of water just to grow 16 almonds. So
Where'd you get that from?
I got that. It'll be in our bibliography. There'll be sightings in the
as
bibliography.
opposed to destroying square miles of rainforest for cows to feed.
What rainforests have
Come
cows?
on.
Are you
Talk
getting
to
from?
Sting, dude? He's all about the rainforest.
All right, another time. Another huge issue: organic versus or non-organic milk and milk substitutes. Maybe for another time. But if organic means less contamination with pesticides and hormones at a reasonable price, then by all means go organic. Just so everyone realizes that organic does not mean more nutritious per se.
Right. And that will be yet another topic covered down the road when we start to talk a bit about nutrition. I don't think either one of us have any qualms about organic food.
All right, milk issue number 2, which just goes right along with the plant-based. Morton. Did you get that? Morton? McLaughlin Group?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Issue number 2. Just how nutritious are these plant-based milk substitutes? A recent study from last year's Pediatric Gastroenterology and Nutrition confirmed that plant-based beverages vary very widely in their nutritional profiles, and the authors actually recommended that young children drink cow's milk unless there's a medical reason they cannot. Now, 8 ounces of regular cow's milk naturally contains about 8 grams of protein and about 1/3 of the recommended daily requirements of calcium. It also naturally contains potassium and B12, and it's fortified with vitamins A and D. Of the 4 most common plant-based milk products studied, soy, cashew, almond, and coconut, only soy has any significant protein. The other 3 have no more than a gram of protein.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And so soy milk, which does have as much protein as cow's milk, has very little calcium. So most are artificially fortified with calcium. You have to look at the label. The question is, how bioavailable is that added calcium compared to the natural calcium in real milk? And experts disagree on this. Soy products like tofu also have plant-based estrogens that can mimic estrogens very weakly. Now, I have some parents who are very concerned about an estrogen effect in their child, and they even will shun any consideration of a soy formula as an infant. Now, I don't think this is a huge issue with soy products, especially used in moderation. Does that come up with you?
Yeah, from time to time. Actually, I think my children were. We had supplemented at one point when we were having some supply issues at my house with a soy formula, and at that point, a lot of the concern and the research had already been published. And essentially, my understanding of the AAP's position on this is that, number one, there isn't typically a reason to use soy-based formulas, for instance. But number two, that the soy itself doesn't engender any risk of estrogenizing children.
That's what I understand also. Now, the 4 plant-based milk-like beverages studied, coconut milk, you mentioned coconut milk, is the least nutritious one with little or no protein, only small amounts of calcium. Now, whole nuts like almond and cashew are a little bit better, and naturally they're loaded with lots of protein and calcium, but these nutrients are almost completely lost when they're processed into beverages which contain a lot of water.
That's sad. I mean, almonds are like a protein bomb.
Right, so eat almonds.
You betcha.
But I'm not sure if almond milk comes even close. The manufacturers of these plant-based products just add proteins like pea protein and rice protein to raise the protein count, and then they add different calcium products to increase the calcium, and then add vitamins and mix it all together in water. All these ingredients are listed at the side on the nutrition facts label. So those scientists debate if these nutrients are absorbed as well as when it's naturally in food like milk. There are some studies showing that children who drink non-cow's milk beverages have lower levels of vitamin D than those who drink cow's milk, which have similar amounts of vitamin D on the label.
Now, it sounds like you've done this research. At least you've went and looked at things in the supermarket. Are the non-cow's milk-like products fortified with vitamin D?
They are, and the numbers look similar with the ones I looked at. The fat content, sugar, and other sweeteners and calorie counts can vary widely from product to product in plant-based beverages and can be quite high in the flavored plant-based beverages, similar like you'd see in chocolate milk.
Oh, I have a joke for you. Ready?
Okay.
What did the pirate say on his 80th birthday?
I don't know. What did the pirate say on his 80th birthday?
I like this one. I'm matey.
We're also going to... This is Sesame Street and Podcast Pediatrician. All right, lastly... I'm speechless. Lastly, if there is a cow milk protein sensitivity or milk allergy, then plant-based alternatives make a lot of sense. Although perhaps otherwise, regular cow's milk is healthier. So what do you tell moms, or do you tell moms about what kind of milk to drink?
I will typically have folks stick with cow's milk. I think that's the go-to milk until proven otherwise. People who either have a struggle getting into their kids or who have some exception to their feelings about it, I just essentially try to encourage people to get calcium in. I encourage them to get some vitamin D going if their child isn't spending a lot of time outside.
Me too. If someone wants to drink, they're drinking almond milk. It's like, all right, that's fine.
What other calcium sources do you use in your practice if somebody is in the milk?
Well, obviously fresh fruits and vegetables, and a lot of times there's also vitamin D with it. So if I really need substitutes, I have a whole list of different vitamins that they can take, which is another story that maybe the whole vitamin industry is somewhat
you're talking
of a
about
sham.
vitamin D, right? How about
and calcium?
Oh, and calcium as well. So I'll
or Tums.
Yeah, I mean Tums is one that I've used, especially with the teenage girls who I can't seem to convince sometimes to take in enough calcium at that most critical time. But I have a little list of foodstuffs. You probably have the same thing that are calcium containing, but not necessarily milk.
Right.
Some of them are dairy products. Others of them things like English muffins. So yeah, it's a nice,
like the legumes we talked about,
the legumes. So sometimes it's just wise to be able to kind of see into what's going on in the families in your practice and maybe make some suggestions outside of what would normally be in their purview.
Issue number 3. Now, Big Milk is likely very happy with our discussion, but now we cover the A2 versus the A1 milk issue, as outlined in an excellent article in The Atlantic in January of 2017. It turns out that the milk that we all drink, mostly from beautiful black and white Holstein cows, actually differs by one amino acid in position 67 from a second type of milk that's more common in Asia and Africa. Our milk is called A1 milk, and the second type is A2 milk. The A2 type of milk is likely the original milk. Are mostly Holstein A1 cows split off from them 8,000 years ago. The newer A1 milk that we use has become dominant in Europe and North America, and some people think it's because A1 cows just produce more milk per cow, and also the cows are just prettier than the uglier A2 cows. So scientists in New Zealand who discovered this whole A1, A2 milk difference did studies showing that the A2 milk is more nutritious and gives less GI upset than the A1 milk that we drink, and that our A1 milk has more inflammatory compounds, which may be linked to heart disease, asthma, and eczema.
Wow, I had no idea.
So this made me actually think of the late, great Frank Oskey from Hopkins. If you remember, he wrote a book, I think it was called Don't Drink Your Milk. And he felt that milk ingestion was bad for children.
How did he get into the milk thing, though? I guess it was partially because he was chairman, because wasn't he a hematologist oncologist?
He is, but he was brilliant.
He was brilliant.
So I always heard that, and I'm sure Big Milk didn't like it. It's never surprising when things come around and someone who's brilliant, and years later you find out, yeah, there was something to that. Mm-hmm. The big problem with all these studies on A1, A2 milk is that they're all mostly coming from the original group of scientists who teamed up with a billionaire to form the A2 Milk Company, or A2MC, and funded the studies, showing the advantage of A2 milk, which is a huge conflict of interest. They also seem to control the market for these cows and even the skin tests to determine, or hair tests to determine what kind of milk your cow makes.
Wow.
Sounds almost like Big Pharma, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
See episode 4.
Yeah. So right now, A2 milk is a niche.
I'll go
What do
niche
they say
on that,
in
since I went
Jersey?
legume on
Okay.
lagoon.
But it hit the United States in where else? California in 2015. And the big milk lobby was not very happy about it. Hopefully there'll be some more independent studies on A1 versus A2 milk, but I guarantee you'll hear more about it.
Does the A stand for anything except for just nomenclature? Do you know?
No idea.
No. Huh.
No idea.
Had to name it something.
No. So the last milk issue, does skim milk make you gain weight? Multiple studies in Europe have shown that drinking high-fat dairy was associated with lower obesity risk, the opposite of what we tell obese patients and what we might think is logical. Why could this be? There may be a satiety factor, that higher fat dairy makes us fuller faster, so we eat less, or complex bioactive substances in milk fat may help us use and burn off the fat for energy and decrease the amount used for fat storage. By stripping the fatty acids from whole milk, we may be triggering more eating and more fat storage. All right, so here's my quiz, Matt. Do you know what % whole milk is?
Yes. I have read. I've always told my patients that it is 4%.
I think it's 3.
We're going to have to look this one up.
All right.
Man.
We'll look
Yeah,
it up.
4%, because 2% is half of that.
I'm really sure it's 3. At least Mike Pesca said so on the Gist, that it was 3%.
You know what? Put that thing on hold for a second. We're going to look this up.
Okay, we just Googled it, and the answer is 3.5.
That's very unsatisfying. I wanted to win that one.
We call that a push.
Yeah, it's a push. It's a compromise. We'll take it.
A 2013 University of Virginia study showed that preschoolers who were given low-fat milk, as recommended by the AAP, were more likely to be overweight or obese than children given 2% or whole milk. The UVA researchers evaluated 10,700 American children between the ages of 2 and 4, followed in the early childhood longitudinal study. Consumption of 1% and skim milk was most common among the preschoolers who are overweight or obese, possibly reflecting parents' concern about their child's weight. In the study, low-fat milk did not slow the weight gain, and actually children given skim or 1% milk were more likely to become overweight or obese than their peers who drank whole milk. The UVA researcher Mark DeBoer was quoted as saying the association between the low-fat milk and obesity was striking, in that it was present in every single racial ethnic group and every single social strata. It was quite consistent. At both 2 years of age and 4 years of age, children who drank skim milk were the heaviest, then 1%, then 2%, then whole milk. Children who drank whole milk had the lowest weight score.
Wow. Yeah, I had heard things like this as well. In fact, I think that it's interesting on a couple levels, the whole milk topic, because the AAP for many years has suggested whole milk until 2 years old. That's my understanding of that has always been because the extra fat in whole milk helps us to form the myelin sheaths around our long nerves.
Absolutely, and I still agree with that you don't want to go low fat early.
Although there was at least one study that came out a couple of years ago that compared kids who had low-fat milk under 2 years old to compare that to kids with whole milk under 2 years old, and by the time they were 7, developmentally, right down the line, the kids were equivalent. So there wasn't any advantage of the whole milk versus the lower fat milk as it pertained to development from a growth standpoint. So I haven't seen anything since, but it's always one of those things that makes me feel a little bit better when parents in my practice tell me that it's just too hard to have more than one type of milk in the household. So we've been giving the 18-month-old, 1%.
And that's where I've changed things. After the last year, after reading more and more about this, I've been telling my families to edge towards the higher fat, 2% or whole. And obviously 18-month-olds, I'm always doing that. But when they get to 2, 3, even if they're heavy, and maybe especially if they're heavy, and that is not what the Academy of Pediatrics says to do.
No. So let me see. Just to summarize, so whole milk is what the AAP recommends until 2. But beyond that, they recommend low-fat milk. Optimally skim. What it seems as though current research is showing is that is going to more likely than not increase a child's likelihood of being overweight, of being obese.
But not everybody agrees with that data.
And then the other piece of this is indeed whole milk important to a child's development up into the age of 2? And I think there's some dilemma there too. So stay tuned, because this should definitely continue to be a topic of conversation. Regardless of that, did you have your children drink milk when they were younger, Ram?
Not that much.
Yeah,
we didn't have it that much, although we did have sources of calcium, but not that much milk. And
your kids are pretty darn bright. Yeah.
I had a mom maybe 10 or 15 years ago when I mentioned by the AP guidelines of using low-fat milk, and she just kind of really went off saying that's absolutely not true, that whole milk is better in terms of not becoming obese. And this was 10 or 15 years ago, and I was kind of dismissive, and she may have been absolutely right. So I don't remember who it was, but if you're listening, I want to give you some kudos that you might have been right and sincerely apologize for dismissing. So it gets back to listen to mom.
Right.
So I'm usually now saying to people, 2% might be a sweet spot, and it is easier if the whole family drinks the same thing.
It is. And that seems like a trivial type thing, but it's really not, especially when the family is busy and they have kids that have to be hither and yon, and somebody runs out of one type of milk but not another.
And I guess before we leave the specific points, just have to add, since this is pediatrics, one is goat milk is not healthy for children and other living things because it doesn't have folate. You can get megaloblastic anemia. That's always on the boards every single year. And remember, no milk under age 1 because it can lead to GI blood loss and iron deficiency anemia. And that's always on the pediatric boards. And maybe that's how Frank Oski first got interested in the whole milk issue, is the anemia from young babies drinking milk.
Did we discuss the fact that there's some evidence now that that whole milk may be on some level protective against type 2 diabetes?
Another reason for high-fat milk. We'll be right back.
There you go. We are sharing our own personal opinions on pediatric care. Always talk to your own pediatric caregiver about your child. Pediatric caregivers should always consult expert guidelines and consider their own community's standards of care.
Okay, a few quick random pearls. What do you got, Matt?
I think one of the bigger ripoffs in the world is saline that parents buy at drugstore. And I think that because a small 2-ounce bottle of this for babies is going to run you usually about $5. A slightly larger one is going to run you somewhere in the vicinity of $10 to $12, and it's salt water. And so what I'll usually suggest to people is that they carefully make their own. The dosing on this is a half of a teaspoon with about 8 ounces of water. I usually will tell people to use warm water. Some people who are really advocates of cleanliness will suggest actually boiling the water and then using it. But optimally, you want to put this into something glass if you can. If not, at least into some hard porcelain or something, like a cup. And we'll tell people, so take the warm water, take the half a teaspoon of salt, mix it well, let it cool to room temperature, and then just using a routine clean syringe, peeling your baby's nose back like a little piggy nose and putting a couple drops in each side really can make a world of difference. And that can be done really as frequently as you need to during the course of the day.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The thing that I hear over and over again is people using these Frida suckers.
Oh, yeah.
Which
isn't that where the parent just kind of puts one in their mouth and sucks the snot out?
Yes. Although in Chicago, there used to be more parents who just put their mouth over the child's nose and suck it out. I'm not saying only Chicago people do that.
That happened in Philly, too.
But another subject for another time, but are you a big proponent of nasal rinses?
It's something that I honestly haven't had a lot of experience with. I think that you've mentioned to me before that you have. I have a great anecdote from a conference that I went to. It was I think the speaker was Louis First, who I think
he's funny.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still there, but I think he was the chair at University of Vermont.
I think he is
of pediatrics. And so the story he told, it was a lecture on what do you do for the common cold because we don't have much, and he described how to make saline. And then he said, so I had parents and I told them this and I'd seen them in the ER and I got a call a couple hours later that said, hey, look, Dr. First, we've gotten about 4 ounces into him so far through his nose and he looks like he's going to throw up. At which point, I think Dr. First reminded them that I was just the ratio. They didn't have to use the entire 8 ounces.
Yes, he's a comedian trapped in a pediatrician
I found
life.
him amusing when I've heard him.
Yes. All right, I've got, I don't know if it's a pearl, but it's something I like to do with families who I know really well on those long days. Some of it maybe from my own amusement, and if I know they have a good sense of humor. But when I have a kid who's on a sick visit who's not that sick, the young kids who have a strep or an ear infection or a cold, and I usually end up by saying that they need to not watch any TV or videos at all for 2 weeks if they're going to get better. And they usually kind of look at me, and then they look at their parents, and then their parents start laughing.
Do you eventually hope that? Do you let the concrete kids in on it?
But sometimes sometimes the parents are like, oh yes, I've heard that. Thank you, doctor. We can't watch any. And then for the teens, my version of that for the teens is that often if they have something, I'll tell the teenager that actually texting on their phone can cause things like eczema or abdominal pain, and they should probably not text for at least 2 or 3 weeks. Now, they also look right at their parent, but they have more of a panic-stricken look on their face, and then the mom usually starts laughing, and we laugh. But there was one girl who kind of just looked, and like one little tear started coming down from her eye. So I felt really bad about that, but also concerned because, one, that she believed me that her eczema would be better if she didn't text, and two, that she got so upset that she couldn't text that it made her almost cry. And then also, in the same related vein, if there's any kind of piercing, not in a fleshy earlobe, I also will blame unrelated symptoms on that piercing. So if there's an eyebrow piercing, I'll finish and say, you know what? Eyebrow piercings really might be causing your vision to be a little bit worse, or might be causing that cough. And a lot of times they'll again look at me. And these are only parents I know really well. And the parents are like, yes, I agree with you, doctor. Let's do that. But I flip it the other way. If I'm doing a teen visit and the moms are on their phones and not really paying attention, I'll sometimes stop mid-visit and go, wow, I didn't know you got a new piercing. Or wow, look at that tattoo.
Yeah.
And then the moms look up really panic-stricken and the kid starts laughing. So occasionally I've had a time when there's been a piercing or a tattoo and the kid mouths to me, don't tell my mom. I try to respect that.
When I first went into practice, I was trying to do a thorough but discreet exam on a young lady's abdomen, and golly, this must have been 20 years ago. And so I'm palpating her abdomen. I still was trying to keep her sweater down a little bit, and all of a sudden something pinched my finger, my pinky, and I went and jerked my hand up, and it was her new belly button ring. And yeah, so she yelped, I yelped, and I think that was probably our last visit together.
And did Mom know about it?
I believe I believe she did. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a little awkward for me. That kind of falls under the lines of a faux pas for sure.
Yes. All right. We'll be right back. Okay, finally, our freestyling of movies and the Oscars. We'll get to the actual Oscars in a couple minutes. Did you watch it, Matt?
I saw just a small amount of it. I was actually at the movies with my wife that night.
Watching an Oscar-nominated movie?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's something I just found out about this year. Regal Cinemas will let you buy a ticket, essentially, and I think it's for either 8 or 10 days. The theater will show a show at 1 and 4 and 7 and 10, and they're all Oscar contenders. And so you buy this ticket. This year it was $35. You buy a ticket, and it's good for that entire 8 to 10-day span. And so both my wife and I were ill that week, but the final weekend, which was Oscars weekend, we managed to catch 7 films in 2 days.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun.
It's a lot of popcorn.
Mm-hmm. That was a lot of popcorn.
And, we mentioned earlier episodes about the 25th anniversary of Wayne's World, but also just want to say it's the 25th anniversary of Groundhog Day with Bill Murray and Annie McDowell, which I love that movie. And I only mention that because I just saw Groundhog Day, the musical on Broadway in preview, and it was amazing. I didn't expect much, actually, but it was great. The set broke, and I guess that's happening a lot because they're in previews, but it actually has a big show-stopping number about alternative medicine that I really almost fell off my chair.
Huh.
So
it's a musical?
It's a musical.
Wow.
Go see that musical if you can go to Broadway. Huh. And actually, I should say, Matt did see a show. Not Broadway, but you did recently go to a show. What'd you say?
Yeah, here in Wilmington. But I saw Pippin, which was interesting. It wasn't what I expected. Well, my wife said that we had tickets, and I didn't know anything about Pippin. I thought we were going to see Pippi Longstocking, and imagine myself watching some redhead in ponytail frolic around the stage.
Now I'm concerned that you would go to a show called Pippi Longstocking.
When my wife asks, I'm happy to oblige. But yeah, no, it was very energetic. It was a little erotic, which I could have done without. And I think that overall I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't a resounding thing, but that show has my favorite lyric I think of all time, which is "Cats fit on the windowsill, children fit in snow. Why do I feel I don't fit in anywhere I go?"
Wow, you know the lyrics.
We sang it in Syosset Choir. Just a shout out to the late great Elliot Bean. But I just love that. So, all right, Oscar nomination, best films: Arrival, Fences, Hacksaw Ridge, Hell or High Water, Hidden Figures, Lion, Manchester by the Sea, La La Land, Moonlight. I saw all of them except for Hacksaw Ridge. What about you?
I did see Hacksaw Ridge, but I did not see Moonlight. I did not see Fences. I saw all the others, I think. Yeah.
That's good. All in that last weekend.
Yep.
And then I'm going to mention, because I maybe see a little more movies than you do, things that should have been nominated. Sing Street, about Dublin in the 80s. It was kind of the whiplash of this year. It's about a band. You would have loved it. It's about a guitar player.
Oh, cool.
You would have loved it. Jungle Book, I think we both saw that.
Oh, yeah. Visually just
and it won that
astounding.
Oscar.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
And I thought the child actor was fabulous,
yes.
too.
Captain America Civil War. It had the best young Spider-Man ever. I guess you didn't see that, but it was really good. The only thing that ruined it a little bit for me is that Marissa Tomei played Aunt May, and if you read the comic book, Aunt May was like 173 years old, so it was not Marissa Tomei. She doesn't seem
nearly dowdy enough to play Aunt May.
No. Then Star Wars Rogue One, which I wasn't excited about, but it's kind of a offshoot, like Episode 3B. It was terrific. But it also had BB-8, which was one of their droids, which was kind of stole the movie. And then Deadpool, which I really liked, but I'm worried that since it was so successful, they'll start making R-rated superhero movies, which I don't think is a good thing for anybody, including kids.
They're pretty close already with a lot of the violence.
Right. It only works for Deadpool. Mm-hmm. You would never see Love and Friendship. It's a Jane Austen thing, but it was good. Mm-hmm. And then Everybody Wants Some by Richard Linklater, who did Boyhood, about baseball in the 80s. And the best thing was the music. My Sharona, I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick, Heartbreaker. The movies. We're going to go back and forth. And to me, a movie's great if you can remember things about it after you see it. And we'll be careful not to give any spoilers. So, Arrival, Matt.
Yeah, kind of an understated sci-fi movie. So there wasn't a lot of flash to this one, but really interesting concepts. It played with communication, it played with time, and just really, a little bit mind blowing, but in a good way. Amy Adams was awesome.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. She should have won. She should have been nominated, and she should have won. Mm-hmm. So that's just any scene with Amy Adams and the 3D communication was awesome. Fences. I wish I saw this on Broadway. Denzel Washington from St. Elsewhere. Remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
I love that show.
I'd forgotten he was on that. Who else was on that?
He was
a couple other big timers.
We'll hit that in the future.
All right, because we need to talk about St. Elsewhere.
He was amazing. And the scenes between him and his son, when he's kind of talking about his son not owing him anything and then not wanting his son to play sport, was the best scenes of the movie. I thought Viola Davis was amazing. She should have been nominated for Best Actress, not Supporting Actress. But that was a great movie.
Yeah, so I saw, before I realized it was going to be nominated, I saw Hell or High Water. I'm always up for a good film noir, and this is under the auspices of a Western, although it's in modern times, about a couple of bank robbing brothers with a big agenda that they need to fulfill. Just really good stuff. Good acting. Chris Pine impressed me. I really had only known him up to this point as Captain Kirk in the Star Trek movies. Right. Yeah, blanking on the guy who played his brother, but he was phenomenal. And then Jeff Bridges was kind of a crotchety old sheriff, and just good acting. A little bit of action, just enough. Some tension, and boy, the last scene was really fantastic between two of the main characters. Just created just a really interesting tension that I thought was a great way to end a film.
Yeah, people will be quoting that last conversation for a while. Hidden Figures. Did you see it?
I did. Yeah. What did you think?
I thought it was great. I thought it was very Disney-esque, the way everything kind of wrapped up together. The memorable part for me is the scenes between Taraji Henson and Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah.
Where he's kind of a racist.
Yeah, they were good.
And the cool thing about it was that it wasn't like at the end of the movie they ended up singing "Kumbaya" and
no.
You know what I mean, it didn't change. It was more realistic than you sometimes see.
What really struck me, as much as the racism aspect of it, which really was, I think, telling and astounding from that era, was the misogyny in general. Women just were completely second-class citizens, and particularly if you were a black woman living in that time here in the U.S. So no, it was very, very good. Not my favorite, but very good.
Lion.
I enjoyed Lion a lot. I'm a big Dev Patel fan. I thought he was marvelous, Slumdog Millionaire, but he has really become a very mature and marvelous actor. Boy, there was a child in that. You saw Lion, didn't you?
Oh, the scene, the young child just stole the movie, and that young child running around screaming when he couldn't find his part of his family was the single part of the movie that I'll always remember.
Yeah, it was really, really gut-wrenching and heartbreaking in a good way. I just thought it was very well acted and without a lot of dialogue in that part.
And here's my pediatrician problem with the movie.
Yeah.
Is that Dev Patel, who is a wonderful actor and plays this character who supposedly grows up after spending his initial childhood very malnourished in India, and he's really tall. And just from a pediatrician, I'm like, if you were malnourished for your first 5 or 6 years, you would not be that tall.
Hey,
maybe that's unfair, but I was thinking, like, how could he get that tall?
When you can get Dev Patel for your movie, I don't think that his height is going to...
I guess so. And then any movie that tries to make Nicole Kidman look dowdy is not really going to work. They just put her in and think she's still beautiful.
She is.
Manchester by the Sea. Now, I thought that was the most crushingly sad movie I'd seen in a long time, and I loved that movie. And I thought Casey Affleck deserved the Oscar, despite any other off-camera issues. He was amazing, and the scene between him and Michelle Williams also was the best scene in a movie all year.
Yeah. I like a good sad movie because I like to see real life portrayed. And I agree with you with Casey Affleck. I thought he was just nothing short of brilliant in this role. Just this simmering, discontented, but a guy who's kind of accepted his lot in life. And boy, just if you haven't seen it, see it. Absolutely. It was my favorite. It was my favorite of all the Oscar contenders.
La La Land. I think I liked this better than you did, Matt.
Yeah.
It did drag at times. I love the City of Stars, and I love the montage at the end. And I loved Emma Stone, who shout out to Brandywine's own Suzanne Spangler-Jackson, who was her voice coach on Cabaret, which she was on Broadway, and she was great in that. So she was great, but Amy Adams was better.
Yeah. I expected it to be Broadway-ish, which of course it was. I thought that the cinematography was spectacular. I was really surprised with Emma Stone's voice. I thought it was really lovely, and not in a classically trained way, but lovely in just a pure way. Another winner, just don't feel as strongly about this one as I did about Manchester by the Sea.
And lastly, Moonlight, which was a wonderful movie. Matt, you had it out on Redbox for 10 days and didn't watch it. So that's how Redbox makes their money.
Not the first time that's happened at my house, but usually to me.
The scenes with Mahershala Ali from House of Cards with Little Man were the things that stuck out in my head. Plus, later scenes with Naomi Harris with Little Man when he's a little bit older. She deserved the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. The movie was a little indie movie that could. There also was a movie called Sing, which is a winner of the short action film category for Hungary about a kid's choir. And you should try to find that on demand. It was great. All right, the Oscars. So again, Matt watched some highlights for it. Jimmy Kimmel, I thought, did a spectacular job. He went a little bit long. Some of his bits didn't always work, but I appreciated the effort. I closed my eyes. It sounds like it's David Letterman. I know he loves David Letterman, but he actually sounds just like David Letterman. And the big gaffe at the end. I was watching it live. I was texting with someone and texting, boy, Warren Beatty is a jerk. I just thought he was just stretching things out to be a jerk. And then it turns out that he was one of the only people who was trying to see if he could do something because he knew something was wrong. So I apologize to Warren Beatty, that accountant who is taking selfies with Emma Stone and gave the wrong envelope. I hate for people to lose their career on one mistake, but he certainly never should be involved with the Oscars again. Truly a blockheaded move.
Favorite Warren Beatty movie?
Bonnie and Clyde, Reds.
Heaven Can Wait. I loved that movie when it came out. I don't know what it was, but for the longest time, it was my favorite movie. Reds, I got to say, I went with a friend who wasn't really into it, and it was so long and tedious after a while. And I didn't know the history, so it was...
I like the history.
Bonnie and Clyde, though. Classic.
Right. We'll say that the person who saved the day was the producer from La La Land.
Oh, from La La Land.
Who was so gracious to say, hey, you guys won. And guess where he went to school? And you go Cats, Northwestern. All right, lastly, to wrap this up, I know you finally wrapped this up. My most memorable moment in a movie theater this year was watching the documentary I Am Not Your Negro in Theater N, our little artsy Delaware theater. In that movie, there's a clip from 1968 from a Dick Cavett show that had a Yale philosopher, Philip Weiss, that started telling James Baldwin that he makes way too much of race and that we should just connect as people. And
they were both guests on the show?
Both guests.
Oh, okay.
Would you ever have a philosopher on a show anymore? No, but it was 1968. So, he was kind of a liberal and kind of saying that, like, yeah, I can understand that. And then James Baldwin just was unforgettable as he just eviscerated that argument to talk about what it's like growing up as an African American in 1968, which really completely resonates even more so about 30 years later.
Wow.
I do hope someday that same director explores how a gay black man, James Baldwin, became the voice of civil rights at that time, since there was not a lot of LGBTQT tolerance in the civil rights community.
Yeah.
So that's another amazing story for another day. But you should go see that movie, I Am Not Your Negro. It really is one of the most significant documentaries I've seen in a long time.
I'll have to check that out.
Lastly, Matt, are you going to go see Beauty and the Beast? Got great reviews.
As much as I enjoy Emma Watson,
Harry Potter?
Harry Potter's come to Hogwarts. Yeah, that's a big in-joke at my house. I don't know.
I think I will. I think I will. All right. Coming up, the much-promised constipation episodes.
Say goodnight, Moon.
Moon. Podcast Pediatricians Productions. All rights reserved.